What I'm about to tell you will make you question every school bus ride you've ever taken. 3 real stories, 3 different families. 1 terrifying truth that school districts don't want parents to know. My cousin Sarah, she was 8 years old when a man in a stolen bus uniform drove her into the middle of nowhere and told 3 children to get off, miles from any house. As darkness fell, Danny tried to tell his mom for 2 weeks, "There's a man following our bus, Mom, every single day." She didn't believe him until the day he got out of his car. And what happened to me on that rural route when our driver got a call about someone watching us from the woods? Someone who'd been there for weeks with a folding chair and cigarettes, waiting. The police never caught any of them. The school districts knew. Parents weren't warned. These buses still run these routes. Your children might be riding them. Write N-O-W. This happened to my cousin Sarah when she was in 3rd grade back in 2018. She lived in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone. So when the regular bus driver, Mrs. Henderson, was out sick for a week, nobody thought much of the substitute. The new driver was a thin, pale man who always wore sunglasses, even on cloudy days. He never spoke to the kids, just nodded when they got on. Sarah said something felt off about him from day one. He kept adjusting his rearview mirror to look at the kids instead of the road, and he took routes that were way longer than necessary. On the 3rd day, instead of dropping Sarah off at her usual stop, he drove right past it. When she called out, "Hey, that's my stop," he didn't respond. She tried again, louder. And he just looked at her in that mirror with those dark sunglasses. Sarah was getting scared. The bus was nearly empty by then. Just her and 2 other kids who lived further out. She started walking toward the front of the bus, but he suddenly pulled over on a deserted country road and opened the door. "Get off," he said in this weird, raspy voice. It was the first time she'd heard him speak. Sarah was terrified. But she got off the bus. So did the other 2 kids. They were miles from anywhere, with no houses in sight. The driver just closed the door and drove away, leaving 3 elementary school kids stranded on a back road as it was getting dark. Luckily, Sarah had her mom's old flip phone for emergencies. They called 911, and the police found them within an hour. Turns out, the man wasn't a substitute driver at all. He'd somehow gotten hold of a school district uniform and had been using a stolen bus for 3 days. They never caught him. The real substitute driver had been tied up in his own garage for 3 days. He survived, but to this day, nobody knows what that fake driver was planning to do if Sarah hadn't had that phone. My friend Marcus told me this story, and I still get chills thinking about it. This was in suburban Detroit, around 2019. Marcus was in high school then, and he usually drove himself to school, but his car was in the shop for a week, so he had to take the bus. The afternoon route was different from the morning one. It serviced some of the more isolated neighborhoods on the outskirts of town. Marcus had never been on it before, so he didn't know that the last few stops were pre-spaced out, with long stretches of wooded areas between houses. About halfway through the route, this kid named Danny, who was maybe in middle school, started acting really strange. He was sitting near the back, and Marcus could see him from where he was sitting. Danny kept looking out the back window and whispering to himself. At first, Marcus thought maybe he was on his phone, but then he realized the kid was having a full conversation with someone who wasn't there. "Yeah, I know," Danny would say, nodding at nothing. "I see him too." The weird part was, other kids started looking out the back window too. Marcus turned around and there was definitely a car following the bus. It was an old sedan staying about 50 yards back, making every turn the bus made. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was what Danny said next. "He's been following us for 2 weeks now, every day. Mom doesn't believe me." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He looked at the bus driver, Mr. Kowalski, who'd been driving that route for years. In the driver's mirror, Marcus could see his eyes, and they looked scared. When they got to Danny's stop, the kid hesitated before getting off. The car had stopped too, just far enough away that you couldn't see the driver clearly. Danny finally stepped off the bus, and Marcus watched through the back window as the car slowly started moving forward. Mr. Kowalski must have been watching too, because instead of driving away immediately, he sat there with the bus door open. After about 30 seconds, Danny came sprinting back and jumped on the bus. "He got out of his car." Danny was crying now. "He got out and started walking toward me." Mr. Kowalski called the police right there. They came within minutes, but the car was gone. Danny's mom arrived shortly after, and Marcus overheard her talking to the police. Apparently, Danny had been telling her about a car following the bus for weeks, but she thought he was making it up for attention. The police escorted Danny home that day and for the rest of the week. They never caught the guy, but Marcus said Danny's family moved away that summer. He couldn't blame them. This one is personal. It happened to me when I was a sophomore in high school about 6 years ago. I lived in a rural area where the bus routes were long, and sometimes we'd be on the bus for over an hour getting home. Our driver was this older guy named Frank, who'd been doing the job for like 20 years. He was usually pretty cheerful, always had the radio on, made jokes with the kids. But that day, something was different. Frank seemed nervous. Kept checking his mirrors more than usual, and he'd turn the radio off. We were about 20 minutes from my stop when Frank suddenly pulled over on the side of the road. Not at a bus stop, just a random spot next to some woods. He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. "Everyone stay in your seats," he said, but his voice was shaky. There were maybe 15 kids on the bus at that point. We all looked around at each other, confused. Frank opened the bus door and stepped outside. Through the front window, we could see him talking on his cell phone. Pacing back and forth, he kept looking at the bus, then at the woods, then back at his phone. After about 5 minutes, he got back on the bus, but he didn't start the engine. He turned around to face us. "Kids, I need you to listen carefully," he said. "I just got a call from the district office. There's been a situation." Another bus driver radioed in about a man in the woods along this route. A man who shouldn't be here. My blood went cold. Frank continued. The police are on their way, but until they get here, we're going to wait right here, with the doors closed. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. We all sat in complete silence, staring out the windows at the tree line. Every shadow looked like it might be moving. Every sound made us jump. Finally, we saw police cars approaching. 2 officers got out and walked into the woods near where we were parked. They were in there for maybe 10 minutes before they came back and talked to Frank. One of the officers got on the bus and told us that they'd found evidence that someone had been watching the bus route. Disturbed ground where someone had been sitting behind trees, cigarette butts, even a folding chair hidden in the brush. But whoever it was had left before they got there. Frank drove us home after that, but the mood on the bus was never the same. A few parents complained and got their kids transferred to different routes. The police increased patrols in that area, but they never found who had been watching us. The worst part? About a month later, Frank told me that it hadn't been the first call about someone in those woods. The district had been getting reports for weeks, but they hadn't told the drivers or parents because they didn't want to cause a panic. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if Frank hadn't gotten that call when he did? What if whoever was watching had decided to do more than just watch that day? I still take a different route when I drive through that area.